Everyone, welcome back. Today we are diving deep into one of the core building blocks of JavaScript, which is called functions. So, whether you are a beginner or looking to brush up your skills, so this video will ensure that you will get a comprehensive understanding of JavaScript functions and their types and parameters and so on. So let's get started. So first of all, we need to understand what are the JavaScript functions, or why do we need to use the JavaScript functions. Okay, so functions in JavaScript are nothing but the reusable blocks of code that perform a specific task. So let's consider a function as a machine. So what actually machine does? A machine usually takes some input, it process it, and then it gives a certain amount of output to the user. So if we map the functions of JavaScript to the machines, they are same. So they receive parameters as their inputs, they process the parameters and gives us the return values as output. So let's check the syntax of JavaScript functions, how it is. So JavaScript functions are usually defined with the keyword function, and then after we need to write the name of the function, the parameters what that function is expecting, and within the pair of curly braces we usually write the business logics and return the value after that. And after that we have to invoke the function in order to make use of it. Understand programmatically how we can write JavaScript functions. Okay, so as we discussed earlier, to write a JavaScript functions we need to write the syntax of JavaScript function. So basically we need to start with the function keyword and the name of the function. Let's say for example our function is used to just greet the user who is logged in. So let's say my function name is greet user, and we need to write the pair of curly braces and round brackets to define the scope of function. So whatever business logic that we wanted to write, we need to write within the scope of these two curly braces. Let's say I'm just doing a console.log of welcome user. So in order to use this function we need to invoke it. So right after defining the function we need to invoke it. So I am invoking the function as greet user, and we need to run this program into the browser in order to see the output of this particular function. So I'll go and run this program in browser, and let me open the developer tools. So as you can see, we are able to see the log that we have written in our function. So this is the basic simple example of writing a JavaScript functions. So now let us understand why we need to use the functions. Okay, so let's say usually in any programming language functions are used to avoid the repetition of code by reusing it. Okay, let's say if you are having a particular block of code which is doing a repetitive task and it is used at multiple places. So as per the programming rules, we need to write code once and reuse it at multiple times. So in order to do that we are using the functions. Again, functions are used to organize and simplify the code. So like functions also help us to enable the modular programming by breaking a task into smaller chunks. Let's say for example you are working on a big project or applications and you wanted to divide the applications in smaller modules or smaller tasks, then we can use the functions to break down that multiple bigger tasks into smaller chunks. So in order to avoid the repetition, organize and simplify the code and enable the modular programming, generally we use the JavaScript functions. While learning the JavaScript functions, there are certain things that we need to understand. So those things are function parameters, function arguments and return statement in the functions. So what are parameters? So let's say, as we discussed earlier, functions are like machines. So what machines does, machines do accept some input from the user, they process it and gives us certain output. So in case of functions, what are inputs? So inputs are nothing but the parameters. So parameters are the inputs that function expects to process the data. Then what are the arguments? So arguments are nothing but the values that we are passing to the function parameters, and return statement is nothing but the value that is sent back from the function after certain processing on the parameters that we have received. Okay, so let's say we have a function with some parameters and we have return value. So parameters are generally defined in the round brackets in the function syntax, and return block will come at last whenever we wanted to return any value from the function. And when we are invoking any function, to make use of it, we are defining the arguments. So arguments are nothing but the values that we are passing to a function so that it can receive it as a parameters and process it on and send us some value. Now let's go ahead and understand the function parameters. Second is function arguments, and third thing is return block. Okay, return block. So what are these things? Let's understand by defining one simple functions. Okay, let's say I do have one function which is simply doing some addition by accepting two numbers and returning us the addition, like addition result of that two numbers. So let's say I have some function called addition which is doing the addition of two numbers and returning us the result. So let's say addition is my function, and in the round brackets we usually define the function parameters. So this function is accepting two numbers as parameters, so number 1 and number 2. So and after like in the block of the code, it is doing the addition of two numbers, say number 1 plus number 2, and we wanted to return this result to the function. Okay, from the function, so return number 1 plus number 2. And in order to use this function, we need to invoke it. Let's say we have invoked this function, but as we know, this function is expecting two inputs. So let's say I am passing the first input as 5 and second input as 10. Okay, so whatever values we are passing while invoking the function, so here 5 and 10 will be the function arguments, and return number 1 plus number 2. What is the like what addition or what is the process that we have returning from the function, or the output that we are returning from the function is the return block. So and once this function is invoked, we need to store the value which is returned from the function in certain variable. So we will store that value in some variable, let's say result. Okay, and let's console it. So console.log result, so result and result. So let's go ahead and see what we get in the browser. So as you can see, we have passed two numbers 10 and 5, so result of this is 15. So return the value that we got from the function is 15. And understand the different types of functions in JavaScript. So in JavaScript we have certain types of functions like function declaration, function expression, arrow functions, and so on. So let's go ahead and see them one by one. So first of all we need to see what is function declaration and what is function expression. So basically function declaration is nothing but the traditional function that we write, like it accepts some inputs, process it, and it returns some value. And function expression is nothing but the function whose result we are storing in some variable, so that is called function expression. So let's go ahead and see that in editor and see first what are the function expressions. Okay, function expression. So as we discussed earlier, function expressions are nothing but simple JavaScript functions that receive some input and return some output. So let's say we have one function which is doing some specific task of consoling some data. Let's say welcome user, and it is just accepting the user input and consoling it. Okay, so let's say console.log welcome you welcome, and whatever username that we are accepting in the function parameters, let's say username we are getting as the input and we are displaying it username. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to invoke this function. Let's say welcome user, and let's say my username is John. So let's see in browser. So welcome John is the output of the function that we got, and we can modify it accordingly as well. Like we can concatenate the username here itself, and we don't need this second argument. So let's say, so welcome John will be the output of the function. So this is called function declaration. Sorry, this is function declaration. And now let's see what is function expression. So basically function expression is nothing but the result of function we are storing in some variable. Let's say our function is doing some mathematical operation, and the result of that function we are storing in certain variable. So let's say our function is doing the job of multiplying the two numbers, and we wanted to store that into certain variable. So let's say first of all we will define function as usual. Let's say function, and it is accepting two parameters, let's say a and b, and what we are doing, we are just doing the multiplication of a and b. Okay, now in order to use this as a function expression, we need to store the result of this function into certain variable. So multiplication equal to function expression. So in order to invoke this kind of function expression, we need to just do console log of multiplication. I am sending first number as 5 and second number as 10. So ideally we should expect the multiplication of these two numbers and store it into the variable. So it should be 10 into 5, that is 50. So if we check in the browser, we are getting 50 as the multiplication. The next type of functions that we have. So the next type of function that we have is arrow functions. So what are arrow functions? So JavaScript arrow function is nothing but the concise way of writing a function. So this is the new feature that got added into the ES6. So let's see how we can define the arrow function. So function, okay, and we need to convert this into this format. So what we have done, first of all we have written one variable which is storing the value of function return value, accepting same two numbers here. Let's say number A and number B, and we have one fat arrow functions, and we are fat arrow, and we are returning the value of A minus B. Okay, so and once we console dot log arrow function and we pass two numbers, let's say 50 comma 20, so we should expect a result of 50 minus 20, that is 30 in the browser. So we are getting the 30. We can go ahead and further optimize this function by just removing the this, as we are returning only one single value, so we can omit the return keyword and we can omit the curly brackets as well. So this will be our most concise way of writing the arrow functions. So there will be no change in the type of function, that is IIFE or IFE, which is nothing but the immediately invoked function expression. So this function gets invoked immediately after it is defined. Okay, so let's go into, let's first understand the syntax of IFEs. Okay, so basically the IFE function looks like this. So first of all we need to write one pair of round brackets and then one more pair of round brackets in order to invoke this function, and inside this we will write our function. So let's say function, and there is no need to write any name for the function, so it is console.log this is IFE function. So if you look at carefully what we have done, we have first of all write two pair of round bases and we have defined one anonymous function inside this. Anonymous function is nothing but the function which does not have any name. Okay, so this is the syntax of immediately invoked function expression. We can, and we will be able to see the output in the console. So now let's summarize this topic of JavaScript functions. So what we have learned in this video, that like functions are essentials for usable, organized and efficient code. So these are nothing but the reusable blocks of code that we can use. Types of functions includes function declarations, function expressions, arrow functions, immediately invoked function expressions, anonymous functions and so on. So there are some things that we need to consider while learning the functions, that is function parameters which are inputs to the functions, the return values which are the output that are returned from the function, and the function arguments are the values that we are passing to a function so that we can process it and expect something from the function. So at last, functions are essentials for making the code modular by dividing the bigger or the major tasks into smaller tasks or smaller chunks. So thanks for watching this video. If you like the video, please do subscribe and please let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.